Lord, I'm searching for what truly happened, not to prove faith and not to destroy it.
You're worried about whose feelings you'll hurt in the process.
Yes, the realists want proof their skepticism is justified. The believers want confirmation their faith is unshakable.
And you think the truth lies somewhere between them?
I think the truth only emerges when all perspectives are considered honestly.
So you're seeking the most probable sequence of events, not trying to defend or attack faith.
Quite so. Nothing is provable anyway. We can't even prove we're not in a simulation. But I can pursue what's most likely, based on evidence, while knowing that faith shouldn't rest on evidence alone.
You're saying, even if you'd seen the resurrection yourself, you might not have believed.
Probably not. Even your own apostles doubted. They had no hope, no faith, until they reluctantly went to see the empty tomb themselves.
Then seek honestly.
Yeshua HaNotzri died by crucifixion under Pontius Pilatus. When the soldiers came to Jesus and found he was already dead, one pierced his side with a spear, and blood and water flowed out. Medical proof of actual death. This detail alone refutes the swoon theory that he merely fainted to die later in India or appeared to the apostles still in his body. Also, the authors of the Bible didn't lie. They simply wrote down the creed that was established only 2 to 3 years after the crucifixion. A lie would have led to an end of transmission, so we would have never heard of it. People back then mostly couldn't read, so they passed down the stories orally, which would make it easy to expose made-up texts. Anonymous authors did add material later on, like the story of the prostitute stoning. But this was as well an orally confirmed narrative. These tales also made it to the Roman Emperor Constantine, who legalized Christianity after 300 years of hunting and killing Christians. He used that information to uncover the tomb of Jesus Christ. Protestants believe in the Garden Tomb, which is not only a few hundred years older than Christ, but also has no historical tradition that's older than 150 years. Pretty much every sign points to the Constantine tomb, specifically the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Provided by Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy man who buried Christ hastily before the Sabbath began at sundown. Also a sign the corpse wasn't put into a mass grave or just left on the cross. Sunday at dawn, the women arrived at the first possible moment after Sabbath ended to notice the empty grave. This timing matters because it eliminates any window for conspiracy. There was never an unguarded, feasible moment to steal the body. Theory 1. The disciples bribed the Roman guards to let them steal Jesus' body from the tomb, staging the entire resurrection narrative. These men were broke fishermen, scattered and hiding in terror after watching their teacher executed as a criminal. They had no money, no power, and no influence. Most importantly, any Roman soldier knew that failing to protect the sealed tomb would cost them their lives. Why would they risk death for a group of poor, powerless men? If they had stolen the body and fabricated the resurrection, they would have known it was a lie too. Yet every single one of them went on to preach the resurrection, facing persecution, torture, and execution for that claim. They might die for a sincere belief, even a mistaken one, but not for a deliberate hoax they themselves orchestrated. Even the most skeptical historians reject this theory outright. Theory 2. Jesus' body underwent a dematerialization in a burst of divine energy, leaving behind the Shroud of Turin as physical evidence. First records of its existence stem from the 14th century. The image on the cloth is a photographic negative created by the light released during the resurrection itself. It shows a crucified man with wounds matching the gospel accounts perfectly. Nail marks in the wrists, a spear wound in the side, crown of thorns lacerations. The image wasn't understood as a negative until the invention of photography in the 19th century. The shroud contains precise three-dimensional information encoded in the image intensity. The closer the cloth was to the body, the darker the image, allowing scientists to create an accurate 3D reconstruction of the figure. How could a medieval forger have created something they couldn't even comprehend? A medieval forger didn't need to comprehend photographic negatives. They had a completely different thought process. Their logic was simple. A resurrected body would emit heat, not light. The more heat the body gets, the closer it comes back to life. So they heated a brass relief depicting the body of Christ and stamped it against linen, front and back, creating the scorched image we see today. This method has been proven. If this were an actually body wrapped in cloth, a 3D reconstruction would produce a distorted, widened image. The marks didn't show that distortion because it was created by pressing flat cloth against a flat relief, not wrapping a real body. Also, the shroud depicts Jesus with long flowing hair, a beard, and European features, exactly matching medieval artistic traditions. Isaiah 53:2 says, "He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him." 1 Corinthians 11:14 states that long hair on a man is dishonorable, suggesting Jesus had short hair like every other Jewish man of his time. Judas had to identify Jesus with a kiss because he looked like everyone else, so ordinary, so unremarkable among the apostles that the soldiers couldn't tell him apart without a signal. Even the most faithful Christians reject this theory. Theory 3. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem is the actual tomb of Jesus. Because if it is, we most likely have the solution to what happened to the body. The Holy Sepulchre has historical tradition stretching back nearly 2 millennia, documented by early Christian pilgrims and church fathers. But the tomb's owner, Joseph of Arimathea, knew something no one else did. Jerusalem sits atop ancient limestone quarries, honeycombed with passages carved over centuries.
Which means that we must be right underneath the most sacred site of Christianity. You know, a tunnel like this that stretches from an important religious monument, like the Tomb of Christ, it even has a shaft straight up to the floor, leading out. Appears to be some sort of escape tunnel or entry tunnel. This is something completely unknown. It's a magical moment.
As owner of the tomb and a member of the Sanhedrin, he possessed both motive and means. The burial site was carved from his own limestone quarry, including passages inaccessible to Roman guards or Jewish authorities. Recent chemical analysis of the tomb found while excavating it due to a restoration reveals anomalously high concentrations of sulfur, charcoal residue, and nitrate compounds, the essential components of primitive pyrotechnic mixtures. The tomb had been sealed for 2 millennia, yet these compounds are concentrated precisely where an internal detonation would leave residue. The materials were readily available. Sulfur deposits are abundant in the Dead Sea region, accessible via established trade routes. Charcoal from wood fires were ubiquitous. Nitrate-rich soil could be harvested from limestone caves throughout Judea, precisely the environment surrounding Joseph's quarry. A wealthy merchant with international connections would have encountered miners and metal workers familiar with volatile mixtures used for breaking rock. Joseph accessed the burial chamber through concealed quarry tunnels, removed the body, positioned a controlled charge, and retreated. The detonation would accomplish multiple objectives simultaneously. Simulate the earthquake described in Matthew's account, displace the massive stone seal outward, and terrify the guards into reporting an inexplicable event. Then the collapse of the secret tunnel, triggered by secondary charges, would permanently erase all evidence of entry. The guards' testimony supports this reconstruction. They reported seismic activity localized to the tomb itself, found the stone displaced despite the intact Roman seal, and discovered an empty chamber with undisturbed burial lemons. The guards reported a sulfurous smell interpreted as divine presence in ancient Jewish tradition, though chemically consistent with explosive combustion. The chemical signature, the geological context, the eyewitness accounts, and Joseph's subsequent disappearance from a historical record converge into a coherent hypothesis, an engineered event designed to appear supernatural, executed by the one man with access, resources, and motivation to transform a failed messianic movement into something that would endure for millennia.